Hey, what's up, guys? It's Trevor here from Wichita on the Tesla Full Self-Driving. Wanted to come talk to you guys about a stock I've talked a little bit about on this channel, but not too much, called Bitmine Immersion Technologies. BMNR is the ticker. So yeah, this is Tom Lee's company, and right now they've got, I want to say, just a little bit over $10 billion in ETH, in Ethereum. And it's pretty wild. Their market cap is around 14-ish, plus or minus 1 billion, you know, so around 14 billion. So their MNAV is what, like 1.3 or so, which, you know, that's that's apparently about what happens to these treasury companies, these crypto treasury companies, when crypto is not extremely volatile, you know. When crypto is really volatile, you know, the MNAVs on these companies like Bitmine, Metaplanet, MicroStrategy can get pretty wild. They can go over 2, you know, which is probably a little too bullish in my opinion. Never have an MNAV of 2, but what do I know? You know, I'm just a guy on YouTube. Anyway, Bitmine is really one of the few plays you have to get into some Ethereum exposure while still owning stocks rather than the underlying asset itself. And it also helps a lot, I think, for Bitmine that Tom Lee is running the company. You know, he's quite the fellow. He seems like he is just like an eternal bull. You know, he's always thinking that the stock market and crypto are going to the moon, which I personally agree with, you know, for the most part. I agree with almost everything he says. If you take a long-term mindset, it's like, yeah, stocks and crypto do go up. You know, if you're looking at the next just couple months, no one has any, you know, people can guess over what the stock price is going to be next month, next week, 2 months from now, but that's just a guess, you know. But if you look at it years down the road, I really don't see a world where Bitcoin and Ethereum don't both do well. And generally, basically, here's the way I look at it. If Bitcoin does well, then Ethereum historically has always done well and even better than Bitcoin has. So it's kind of like a higher risk-reward ratio than Bitcoin is, Ethereum. But then you add in like the treasury company aspect to it too, where it's like basically these treasury companies are leveraged Ethereum or leveraged Bitcoin, right? So specifically Bitmine being leveraged Ethereum. Now, another note about Bitmine is that Peter Thiel is like heavily invested in this company. I don't know what percentage of his own net worth is in this company. But last time I checked, he had around like a 10%-ish stake, 9 to 10% stake in Bitmine. So if Bitmine's worth 14 billion, he's got over $1 billion in this company right now. It's just wild to think about, like all the big name players, as well as ARK Invest. ARK Invest has poured money into Bitmine over the past, you know, few months. So it's like you got all these big names that are hyping the stock up and putting their money where their mouth is, you know. Now that being said, there are a couple risks. They're definitely going to be issuing a lot more shares over time, you know. But as long as they can do kind of what these other Bitcoin treasury companies are doing, where they're accreting value for shareholders by increasing the Bitcoin per share, or in this case, the Ethereum per share, then, you know, if that continues to happen, then will this 2025 price look like a joke one day? You know, like, Bitmine already had an all-time high of like, I want to say like 140, 150 bucks a share just a couple months ago, just from straight hype. Ethereum wasn't even like, I believe, Ethereum wasn't even that high back then, you know. Ethereum's had a little pullback recently to like 4,100, 4,200. But, I mean, that could theoretically be a very good, you know, entry point into Bitmine or Ethereum. Ethereum because, buy the dips, right? Not only that, but like, what's pretty wild about Bitmine is that they're actually able to like raise money via issuing shares and warrants at such a premium to the actual price of the stock. Like, if you looked recently, they just they issued like $365 million worth of shares / warrants, right? But at $70 per share. And like, the stock wasn't anywhere close to 70, and the max it's gotten in the past week or so is like 60. So it's like, you got some companies that are having to, like, some treasury companies that are having to discount the price of these shares when they issue warrants or shares. And then some companies like Bitmine, is not very common, that actually get to sell these shares at a premium. So that says something in of itself. If you're selling at a premium, that means that high net worth individuals really want to get on board with what you got going on. And yeah, there's a couple other Ethereum treasury company plays like SBET. And I don't hate SBET, I just really like Bitmine. All the really, all the really smart, wealthy people that are a lot wealthier than me, buying a lot of Bitmine shares, I think is telling. And then, like I said, Tom Lee, everyone that like cares about the stock market or watches CNBC knows exactly who Tom Lee is. So CNBC and Tom Lee are basically boys because he goes on there so often, he's made a name for himself, and now he's like actually like executing one of the craziest ideas ever, and it's doing well. He has a $14 billion company with 10 or 11 billion dollars in treasury assets. It's like, oh my goodness. Like, so Ethereum's 4,100 today. If Ethereum went to 40,000 a share, or a coin, if Ethereum went to $40,000 per coin, that means that if Bitmine didn't buy any more Ethereum after today at all, they'd have $100 billion on the balance sheet in Ethereum, which is actually kind of nuts. That's actually nuts. That's like up there with the Googles, Amazons, Apples, of the world, Microsofts, as far as like how much, cash and short-term investments are on the balance sheet. And they're not having to do anything, they're not having tons of overhead and, 10, 20% profit margins or anything like that. No, they literally just hold these assets. They find ways to accrete more for shareholders, and they're early to the game is really